So this is a website called Paper Digest, which you can access at paperdigest.org. It's a really nice tool for getting a literature review started or to investigate a new research area. So if you click into literature review mode, then you can use the drop-down menu on the left here to refine the research area. So you could restrict it to biology and health or to maths or physics. I tend to leave all areas selected, so it gives me the broadest possible range of papers. Essentially, this is a semantic search tool, so you can write the topic of the review in normal language and it will find papers for you. Along the bottom, we have different options, so you can select whether it is restricted to papers. You can use patents that have been submitted, grants that have been submitted, but this is at the moment restricted to those that are funded by the US government. You can look at clinical trials, or you can restrict it to related experts in the field and notable works. Where I find this quite powerful is that you can also restrict the timeline. So you can select all time, so this will look at papers that have been published in the field as far back as they go. You can restrict it to the past 5 years, so you can see where that research started to move to recently. And then you can restrict it to papers that have been published in the last 12 months, so you can look at the real cutting edge. And so what that allows you to do is to put the same question in and generate 3 different responses, so you can see how the field has progressed from those seminal papers which were published at the start all the way through to the cutting edge research that's being done in the last 12 months. You can also allow large language models, so generative AI, to help with shaping the response, but that does mean that you open yourself up to some bias and hallucination, so I tend to leave that off. You can expand the number of papers it will look at, so by default it looks at 10. By clicking that expand button, you can take that up to 20, so I typically would have that ticked. It does mean that the responses take a little bit longer. And you can also tweak the outputs so that it will change very subtly the way that the outputs are written so that you get a more consistent language. So what you can do is you can write a research question. So my question is about the role of immunometabolism in human disease and immune cell function. I've got it set to papers, so I want to look at peer-reviewed papers. I've got it set to all time with expand and tweak ticked. If I click search, then it will give me a list of 20 research papers which are in that field, and then it will also produce a paragraph which reviews those related works. So you get a nice little paragraph summarizing those top 20 papers. You can also click through to the different papers and it will give you a summary of that paper. You can get more details of that paper, so the impact factor, where it was published and things like that. If I change it to the past 5 years, then I can search again and it will give me a list of 20 different papers, and it will also then produce another review of those 20 papers. So you get a slightly different paragraph summarizing the work in the field in the past 5 years, and so you can see where that field has started to move to. And then you can do the same thing with the past year and it will generate a list of papers that have been published in this field in the past 12 months and a short paragraph again summarizing that. So this is really useful when you're first sitting down to think about writing a literature review, because it allows you to track in time where the field has moved from and where it is at the moment. What I would typically do is take these 3 paragraphs and use them as a framework for the literature review. It's really important you don't just cut and paste the outputs and use them as they are written. The tool is good, but it's not perfect. It's still up to you as a researcher to go and read the papers, make sure that what is in the summary is correct, and to make your own evaluative judgment of those papers. And what I would do as I'm going through those papers is to jot down some of the research questions that spring into my head, because you can use those questions in those papers in other tools later on in the literature review process. So this is paperdigest.org, a really nice tool for just finding those initial seed papers that you might want to use for your literature review and getting some paragraphs written which you can start to then tweak into your own words.